This video will be your new reference point for McKinsey Solve game. In the past 1.5 years or so, over 500,000 of you watched our McKinsey Solve videos, and many of you enrolled in Prepmatter's McKinsey Solve game simulation. As we're getting closer to the end of 2025, I wanted to record another video so I can share with you the latest updates on Solve. Also, since so many of you found our content helpful, I thought I could record another video where I'll walk you through a full McKinsey Solve example using Prepmatter simulation. If you'd like to practice McKinsey Solve examples yourself, check out our website. We're currently running a 50% money back campaign if you fail to perform well in the game. I'm proud to say that 98% of our students score within the top 25% of all test takers, which we understand is McKinsey's benchmark. Our value proposition is quite simple. At Prepmatter, once you gain access to our course, you'll have the most realistic simulation, which you can take many times until you feel confident for your assessment. With today's video, I hope you'll have a good idea of what to expect with Prepmatter simulation. Solve has gone through so many different iterations, but the most recent update took place in July 2025. The ecosystem creation game is phased out. Currently, the Solve game consists of two parts, Redrock Study and Seawolf. In the Redrock Study, also known as Redrock Island, you'll be given a data set about an ecosystem-related topic, and your task is to analyze the data and answer some questions in a gamified format. There are two sections, study and 6 mini cases, which you need to complete in 35 minutes. I'll share a full example later in this video so you can get familiar with it. You can also watch the second part of our other Solve video where I walk through another Redrock Study example from Prepmatter's course. Alright, the second part of Solve is Seawolf, also known as Ocean Cleanup. McKinsey has been piloting this since mid-2024, and now it has completely replaced the ecosystem creation game. In short, your goal is to select the right microbes to clean up the contaminated sites. To do this, you'll perform 4 tasks: setting microbe characteristics, categorizing microbes, selecting a prospect pool, and submitting the treatment. You'll have a better idea about the dynamics of this game later in this video, where I solve an example of a Seawolf scenario from Prepmatter simulation. You can also watch our other video, where I shared more details about this game. You'll find it on our channel. There's one more update about Seawolf. It used to be 35 minutes, but now it is only 30 minutes. So in total, excluding the tutorials, the entire game will take you 65 minutes to complete. Hope the Solve structure is more clear. Make sure to check our website to learn more about the latest with Solve. Before we move to the full walkthrough, can you please do me a favor and hit the like button and comment below? I want to make sure that this video reaches as many people as possible so they're up to date with the latest version of Solve and can prepare better for this assessment. Also, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I personally get back to all messages and can answer any questions you may have. I also share the latest news on LinkedIn first, so add me if you want to be in the know. A quick legal note. The simulation I'll show you was independently created by Prepmatter for educational and training purposes. Let's start the assessment. This is the interface of Prepmatter's McKinsey Solve simulation. Let me go to full screen mode. I'll pick a Redrock Study first. As you see, you'll have plenty of options to choose from. We're continuously expanding our library. I formed a team of 5 ex-MBB consultants and game developers to ensure our scenarios are always up to date. I'll pick one of our latest scenarios, Salvanova. By the way, you can also watch our other Solve video where I walk through the solution of the volatile scenario. It could be an additional practice for you. Let me also select Seawolf. Given the dynamic nature of Prepmatter simulation, the Seawolf scenario I'll solve today will be different than the one in our video. So again, you can watch that video for additional practice. Let's begin. Let's read the introduction. Welcome to Redrock Island. As our new research assistant, it will be your job to use data collected in the field to work on various studies and cases here in the Redrock Labs. For work on studies, we've developed a 3-stage system. These stages are called investigation, analysis, and report. During the investigation stage, you will review the collected observations and select the most relevant data points. During the analysis stage, you will need to evaluate the data and perform calculations based on questions from the study. You can drag any movable data point to the research journal to collect it. Alright, let's click Continue. We can see the timer at the top. During the report stage, we will submit written and visual reports based on our analysis. And we can still navigate back to the information in the investigation stage from the analysis stage. After the study phase, we'll move to the cases section. Cases are short questions that investigate different research topics. Case information is independent from the studies and other cases. Alright, just like in other walkthrough videos, I highly encourage you to solve it alongside me. And if you have any suggestions or questions, please leave them in the comments. It really helps our community. Let's begin the test. We have 35 minutes to finish the assessment. This study investigates the complex ecosystem dynamics in Salvanova, a forest that has experienced ecosystem disruptions due to the loss of its apex predator species. You can drag the information you find useful to the research journal to be used later in the case. Additionally, you can reorganize, rename, and highlight entries as important. Okay, that's clear. Let's see the objective. Analyze the impacts of the reintroduction of a predator on Salvanova's herbivore population and vegetation coverage. Let's move to the study information, which is quite lengthy. The vast temperate forest of Salvanova has been experiencing severe ecosystem imbalances due to the disappearance of its native apex predator, the silver wolf. Without these wolves, the population of mountain hares has exploded, leading to overgrazing of native vegetation, which in turn has reduced food sources for other native herbivores like deer. To restore balance, the government is launching a wolf reintroduction program, releasing 150 wolves into Salvanova's highlands and monitoring their impact over a 5-year period. The wolves are expected to regulate hare populations, allowing vegetation to recover, and benefiting other species depending on plant cover. Each wolf consumes 500 hares per year. The current hare population is 500,000 and is growing at 10% a year. If the hare population remains above 500,000, vegetation cover decreases by 3% per year due to overgrazing. For vegetation to recover, the hare population must remain below the 500,000 threshold. In addition, there are currently 50,000 deer, and a 10% increase in plant cover leads to a 3,000 increase in deer. The government is investing in this program not only for the inherent value of biodiversity, but also for economic gain. Recent ecotourism studies have shown that for every 5% increase in vegetation cover, tourism revenue grows by $25,000 due to enhanced scenic value, improved wildlife habitats, and better hiking experiences. Conversely, every 5% loss in cover implies a $25,000 loss. Let's look at the first exhibit. Projected mountain hare population growth with and without wolf reintroduction. We can see the projection for the next 5 years, starting with 500,000. Okay. Moving down to the next exhibit, we can see the projected vegetation cover and additional tourism revenue with wolf reintroduction. In year 0, the baseline vegetation cover is 80%. With wolf reintroduction, it can reach 100% through natural growth and reduced grazing. And it also impacts the tourism revenue positively, reaching $100,000. Alright, there's a lot of information here. While there's no right or wrong, I personally prefer to drag all these data points to the research journal. As we answer the questions in the analysis section, we can always return to this page. But as Prepmatter, we don't know whether it will reduce our overall score. Also, as we transition to the report phase, we are not allowed to go back to this page. So I'm just playing it safe. 150 wolves, 500 hares, 500,000 hares, 10% annual growth, 3% annual decline, 50,000 deer, 10% increase in vegetation cover, 3,000 additional deer, 5% increase in vegetation cover, 25,000 increase in tourism revenue, 5% decrease in vegetation cover, $25,000 decrease in tourism revenue. I'll also drag the data points in the exhibits too. Let's start with the with wolf scenario. Okay. Now, no wolf scenario. I'm dragging these data points systematically, so it will be easier to refer back to them in the research journal. Let me quickly drag the data points from the second exhibit as well. I'll start with the baseline. All right. Now, moving to reduced grazing. Okay. Now, natural growth. And finally, additional tourism revenue. Here's the first question. If all 150 wolves survive the 5-year period, how many hairs will they collectively consume per year? All right, we just need to multiply the number of wolves released, which is 150, by the average number of hairs eaten per wolf. I believe I have this information in the research journal. Let's check. Okay, we had the 500 hairs data. Yes, that's the number of hairs that each wolf consumes annually. Let's multiply 150 by 500 on the calculator. That's 75,000. I'm dragging it to the answer field. If after year 5 ends, the government wants the hare population to be at or below 300,000 to ensure sustained vegetation recovery, what is the earliest year this target population would be met under the wolf reintroduction scenario, assuming normal growth and predation rates? All right, let's first calculate the hare population in year 6. Let me find the year 5 hare population in the wolf scenario. It's 386,890. Let's drag it. We also learned earlier that the population is growing at a certain rate. Let's look at the research journal. It's 10%. Let's put it in the answer field as well. Now, let's apply the growth rate to calculate the year 6 population. All right, it's 425,579. However, we just calculated in 1A that 75,000 hares are eaten by wolves. So let's deduct this amount. The hare population in year 6 is 350,579. It's not below 300,000. Let's keep going. In year 7, this population will grow by 10%. So it's about 385,637. And again, let's deduct 75,000 lost hares. The year 7 population is about 310,000. Again, higher than 300,000. Let's continue with year 8. Multiplying this by 1.1 will give us 341,701. And finally, if I reduce this number by 75,000, we'll get something below 300,000. It's 266,701. So let's select year 8. All right, next question. If the government wants to bring the hare population down to 300,000 immediately after year 5 ends under the wolf reintroduction scenario, they will need to relocate some of the remaining hares. What percentage of the year 5 hare population with wolves must be relocated to achieve the target? This question is more straightforward. Let's take the hare population from year 5, which is 386,890. We used it in the previous question. I'll then deduct 300,000 from it, which is 86,890. So this is the number of hares to be removed. To calculate the percentage, I'll divide this number by 386,890. So it will be 0.2246. But since we need to convert it to a percentage, let's multiply by 100. 22.46. Next, according to Exhibit 2, by how many percentage points will the vegetation cover increase over the 5 years if wolves are reintroduced? Even though I dragged all the data points in the research journal earlier, I'm going to go back and look at Exhibit 2. It will be easier. In year 5, the vegetation cover is 100%. That's 8 plus 15 plus 5. In year 0, it's 80%. So the increase is 20 percentage points. I'll just write 20 in the calculator to speed things up. Okay, if the wolves are reintroduced, how many deer will there be at the end of year 5 if the initial deer population is 50,000, assuming deer don't face predation? We need to first figure out the number of additional deer per 10% increase in vegetation cover. I remember dragging a data point about it earlier. Let's look over. I think it's 3,000 additional deer. Let's click on the explanation to confirm. Yes, that's the number of additional deer per year for each 10% increase in vegetation cover. Let me drag it to the answer field. To answer the next question about the total number of deer after 5 years, we need to know how much vegetation cover will increase over the next 5 years. Let's go back and look at Exhibit 2. In 5 years, we expect vegetation cover to increase by 20 percentage points. So if the number of deer increased by 3,000 for every 10% increase, in 5 years, it will increase by 6,000. But that's not the final answer. Since we assume deer don't face predation, let's add 6,000 and the initial number of 50,000 together. It's 56,000. Let's move to the fourth question. Based on the exhibits and background information, if the wolves were never introduced, what would the vegetation cover percent be in year 5? Let's go step by step. First, we'll need to find the annual vegetation decline rate if the hare population remains over 500,000 in percentage. We already dragged some information about this into the research journal. It's either 3% annual decline or 5% decrease in vegetation cover. Let's look at 3% first. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. Let's move it to the answer field. Since this is the annual rate, let's multiply it by 5. The total vegetation coverage decline will be 15%. Our baseline was 80%, so let's drag it from our research journal. So the year 5 vegetation cover will be 80% minus 15%, 65%. That's our answer. Let's move to 4B. What would the loss of tourism revenue be in year 5 in the no-wolf scenario? Every 5% change in cover corresponds to $25,000 change in revenue. All right. Earlier, we found that the vegetation cover will decrease by 15% in 5 years. So I need to multiply $25,000 by 3. I know the answer, but let's put it in the calculator. The loss of tourism revenue in the no-wolf scenario will be $75,000. All right, let me click complete. From now on, we'll only have access to the research journal. Here's a written report. You can fill in the report by manually inputting information, dragging data from your research journal, or using the drop-down menus. Okay, if you pay attention, our research journal has just been updated. All of our answers are being moved there automatically. Most likely, we'll use these data points in the written report. The disappearance of silver wolves in Selva Nova led to an explosion in the mountain hare population, which grew unchecked at a rate of X% per year. Okay, that should be 10%. Let me move it. Without introducing the wolf program, the hare population would have caused vegetation loss as hares overgrazed, reducing total vegetation cover from X% to Y% over 5 years, and leading to soil degradation and food shortages for deer. We know the base was 80%. Let me find it in the journal first. Okay, and this will reduce to 65%. We found this answer earlier too. Additionally, declining vegetation would have negatively impacted tourism, resulting in a loss of X amount of dollars over 5 years. The very last question we had was about this. The answer we found was $75,000. Let's move to the second paragraph. With wolf reintroduction, hare numbers are expected to steadily decline due to predation. 150 wolves would remove X number of hares per year. Okay, let's go through my previous answers. The first answer we gave was about the number of hares consumed per year. Let me confirm it with the description. Yes, that's it. Now, I need to find the final hare population size by year 5. That should be the second answer. Year 5 hare population. Let me read the description. All right, this is with wolf scenario. Let's put this in. In the model, as the hare population drops closer to sustainable levels, vegetation would begin to recover, reaching full coverage by the end of the 5 years. This regrowth would also benefit deer, whose population would grow to X as plant cover expanded. In the journal, there is a data point about the deer population after 5 years. Okay, just wanted to confirm this is the with wolf scenario. That's 56,000. Finally, ecotourism is expected to rebound in response to habitat recovery, generating X amount of dollars in additional tourism revenue over the same period, highlighting the link between biodiversity and economic sustainability for Salvanova. I believe this is a value we saw in the second exhibit. While I can't go back to the exhibit, thankfully, I dragged all the data points here. Let's scroll up. $25,000 is the year one amount of additional revenue. Since we're looking for year five, it's $100,000. Yes, that's year five value. Great, the return report is done. We're in the graph selection section. We need to select the type of chart that would best visualize a comparison between the vegetation cover levels for year 0 and year 5, with and without the wolf reintroduction. A cluster chart would work best for comparisons, so let's pick that. In terms of values to inputs, our baseline has always been 80%, so I'll simply type 80 in both year 0 boxes. In terms of no-wolf scenario, we calculated this earlier, which was 65%. And in the with wolf scenario, the graph was reaching 100% in the second exhibit because of the added effect of natural growth and reduced grazing. We could confirm this in the journal, but I'll save us some time. Let me write 100 here. Great. That's it for the study section. Let's move to the cases section. We'll solve 6 mini cases. These tend to be more straightforward. McKinsey used to ask 10 complicated questions. Now they streamlined it to 6. And the questions are easier. Okay. Please review the information below to answer the question. This case looks at the sustainability of adding additional wolves. The government needs to find an optimal wolf population to control hares without overhunting. They're considering double the wolf population to 300 and therefore want to understand at which point they will become unsustainable. Let's look at the chart. It shows a hare population with 300 wolves across 5 years. The first question is, given that each wolf requires 500 hares per year to survive, how many wolves can be supported by the hare population each year? All right, for each year, I need to divide the hare population by 500 to find how many wolves can be supported. Starting with year 1, let's divide 400,000 by 500. That's 800. Moving to the next year, 290,000 divided by 500. That's 580. Next, 169,000 divided by 500. That's 338. In year 4, we'll divide 35,900 by 500. It's 71.8. Given it's a decimal, I round it down to 71. And year 5 is 0, given that the hare population depletes. Next, if the government doubles the wolf population to 300, some wolves will begin to starve in which year? So basically, we need to find the year when the hare population can support fewer than 300 wolves. It's year 4. Let's select that and move on. The second case examines alternative predator-prey dynamics of Salvanova. The government is investigating introducing a second predator, the verdant fox, into the ecosystem to accelerate getting the hare population under control. They're interested in the interaction between the wolf, fox, hare, and deer populations. Projected numbers are modeled below. All right, the table is straightforward. Let's read the question. A stable ecosystem requires a hare-to-fox ratio of at least 350 hares per fox. The minimum hare-to-fox threshold is met in one of the 5 years. Okay. For each year, I'll need to divide the hare population by the fox population and check for how many years the ratio is at least 350. In the first year, I'll take the ratio of 500,000 and 600. Okay, that's about 833. Next, let's divide 450,000 by 800. That's 562, again about 350. But the ratio is getting lower. Let's look at the third year. I'll divide 410,000 by 1,000. That's 410. Moving to year 4, I'll take the ratio of 375,000 and 1,200. That's around 312. This is the first time the ratio is below 350. Lastly, in year 5, I'll divide 350,000 by 1,400, which is 250. So in total, years 1, 2, and 3 meet the minimum threshold. So I'll select 3. Let's move to 2B. Each wolf eats 45 deer per year. The government wants to estimate how much deer predation would decrease if the wolf population declines due to dwindling food sources. If the wolf population were to decline by 20% from year 5 to 6, not depicted on the chart, X fewer deer would be eaten in year 6. Okay, first of all, I'll calculate how many fewer wolves would be in year 6. So I'll take 20% of 180. That's 36. Since we know each wolf eats 45 deer per year, I can calculate how many fewer deer would be eaten by multiplying 36 by 45. The answer is 1,620. Let's drag it to the answer field. Alright, the third case assesses different metrics associated with 4 species of trees. Savanova has additional hectares available for reforestation and needs to prioritize the best tree species for carbon capture efficiency and long-term survival. Data on 3 relevant performance metrics are below. Alright, we can see these 4 species and their 3 metrics: cost per tree, carbon sequestration, and survival rate. Let's read the first question. If the government wants to maximize carbon sequestration per dollar spent, regardless of survival rate, the best tree species option is the X tree. Okay, we are looking for the tree species that has the highest carbon sequestration for the lowest cost. So we'll need to divide the carbon sequestration rate by the cost per tree. Starting first with oak, I'll divide 7.5 by 15. That's 0.5. For pine, I'll divide 6 by 10. That's 0.6. And next, mahogany. Let's divide 8.2 by 25. That's 0.328. And finally, eucalyptus. Dividing 5.8 by 8 will give us 0.725. This ratio is the greatest, so let's pick eucalyptus. Moving to 3B. If the government wants to maximize carbon sequestration per dollar spent while only considering tree species with a survival rate of at least 80%, the best option is the X tree. Interesting. Eucalyptus has a survival rate of 75%, so it wouldn't work. The second best carbon sequestration per dollar spent ratio was with the pine tree, so let's pick that. And let's move to the next case. This case examines changes to forest coverage in Savanova's key regions. Savanova's forest coverage has fluctuated over the past decade due to deforestation, reforestation efforts, and natural recovery. The government is tracking changes in forest coverage percentages across 3 regions: highlands, lowlands, and coastal zone. Alright, this chart shows the forest coverage percentages by region. Let's read the first question. The region with the greatest improvement over the 5 years was X, which saw an X percentage point increase in forest coverage. Okay, that's quite straightforward. Let's calculate the percentage point change of forest coverage for each region. I'll compare years 1 and 5. The highlands saw a difference of 60 minus 45, so 15, while in the lowlands, the difference is 35 minus 50, so negative 15. And finally, the coastal zone. The difference is 50 minus 40, so 10. The region with the greatest improvement is the highlands, so let's write 15 in the answer field. Let's get to the next question. The region that needs the most urgent conservation efforts is X, which saw an X percentage point loss of forest coverage in 5 years. Referring back to our calculations earlier, the lowlands had a decrease of 15 percentage points, so let's pick that and write 15. Alright, this question was easy. Let's move to the next case. This case examines water availability in Savanova's key regions. In addition to looking at forest coverage percentages across 3 regions, highlands, lowlands, and coastal zone, the government is also considering the water availability in each region as another factor in reforestation efforts. Okay, the chart shows water availability over the 5 years per region. Let's read the question. The government needs to determine which region should receive priority funding for reforestation based on the stability of water availability. The region with the most stable water availability is X, with a range of X millimeters over the 5 years. I interpret water stability as the difference between the maximum and minimum levels. So for the highlands, I'll take the difference of 1210 and 1180. Let's put this in the calculator. That's 30. For the lowlands, the maximum level is 950, while the lowest is 870. So the difference is 80. And finally, in the coastal zone, I'll take the difference of 790 and 700. That's 90. So the most stable water availability is in the highlands with a range of 30 millimeters. Let's read the second part of the question. The region with the least stable water availability is X with a range of X millimeters over the 5 years. As per our calculation earlier, this region would be the coastal zone with a 90 millimeter range. We're almost there. Time is also running out, so let's read the final case. This case looks at 3 additional conservation strategies. The government has $12 million available for conservation projects and must decide between 3 options: reforestation, water conservation, and soil restoration. Let's look at the chart. Cost and plant introduction capacity of conservation projects. On the x-axis, we see new plant species per hectare, and on the y-axis, we can find cost per hectare in dollars. Great. Let's read the first question. How many hectares can be restored with $12 million in funding for each option? And how many new plant species can be introduced? Let's start with the hectares restored first. To find this, we need to divide the total budget of $12 million by the cost per hectare data in the graph. For the project A, reforestation, I'll divide 12 million by 6,000. Let's do it on the calculator. 2,000 hectares. Let me drag it. For project B, water conservation, I'll divide 12 million by 7,500. That's 1,600. And for project C, soil restoration, we'll do 12 million divided by 6,500. That's about 1,846. All right. Next, we need to find out the number of plant species introduced with each project. To calculate this, we'll need to multiply the number of new plant species per hectare, which are in the graph, by the number of hectares we've just calculated. For project A, let's multiply 2,000 by 24. That will be 48,000. For project B, I'll multiply 1,600 by 19. That would be 30,400. And lastly, for project C, let's multiply 1,846 by 21. It's about 38,769. And the last question is, the option that introduces the highest total number of new plant species per dollar spent is which project? If I were to do this the long way, I'd have to divide the number of plant species by $12 million and choose the highest project. But since the denominator is the same, I'll just pick the one that has the highest number of plant species. We made these calculations earlier. That will be project A. Great. We finished the Redrock study. At Prepmatter simulation, if you choose to play the full solve simulation, you'll see your final report at the end of the assessment. So after playing the Solve game. But since we're shooting a long video today, I wanted to show what our final report would look like now. Our results page is divided into 3 segments: Part 1 analysis, Part 1 report, and Part 2 cases. It seems we nailed every single question in the Part 1 analysis. Let's go to the report phase. That's all correct as well. And lastly, the cases section. Great, we answered all the questions correctly. You can also download this feedback form as well as the detailed answer sheets, so you can see how to answer each question. Let me show you an example. As you can tell so far, solving the Redrock study can get quite tiring. In the actual assessment, the timing is paused when you're transitioning from the Redrock study to the Solve game. So you can take a little breather in the middle. All right, before I begin solving a Solve scenario from Prepmatter Solve simulation, if you haven't done so, I'd highly appreciate it if you could like this video. And if you have any questions about the game, feel free to drop them in the comments. As a reminder, once you get access to Prepmatter Solve simulation, you can always practice Seawolf unlimited times since you will encounter a different scenario each time. In this video, I'm focusing on the full game walkthrough, but if you'd like to learn more about the tips and tricks to ace Seawolf, you can also watch our other video on YouTube as well. Let's begin. Alright, we're responsible for researching and treating 3 different contamination sites. For each site, we'll identify 3 microbes, whose combined characteristics, when averaged, create a treatment that best fits the given site profile. Basically, we'll need to perform 4 tasks: setting microbe characteristics, categorizing microbes, selecting a prospect pool, and submitting the treatment. Let's continue with the tutorial. On the right, we'll see a range of attributes and traits we need to consider to effectively treat the current site contamination. And on the left, we can see the characteristics panel. We'll choose 2 characteristics, which can be any combination of attributes and traits. While our selection will not directly affect microbes we'll be categorizing, it will influence the initial prospect pool. Alright, microbes have 3 attributes and 1 distinctive trait. In this section, we'll be presented with 10 microbes. Carefully review their characteristics one by one and assign each microbe to either current site, next site, or return them if they don't fit either site. Okay. For a microbe to be considered an acceptable fit, it should ideally fall within the preferred range for 2 attributes and avoid displaying the undesired trait. Let's move on. Our initial prospect pool is composed of 6 microbes and is influenced by our previously selected characteristics. We're tasked with selecting a single microbe to be added to the prospect pool from a set of 3 microbes. We'll do this 4 times. Okay, that's clear. The effectiveness of our treatments depends on the average attributes and collective traits compared to the site information presented in the right corner. Treatment effectiveness will be decreased by 20% for the following: each average attribute out of range, having 1 or more undesired traits, and having no desired trait. There may not be a microbe combination that is 100% effective. Okay, for those who aren't familiar with the scoring criteria, let me share the visual I've shared in our other Seawolf video. If you'd like, pause this video now to digest the content. Alright, moving to the last page of the tutorial. When we begin Site 2, we'll start by reviewing and sorting the microbes that were previously assigned to this location. Once we've completed this step, we'll follow the same process as before. And after completing Site 2, we'll repeat the same steps for Site 3. Perfect. Can't wait to get started. Again, I'm solving a randomized scenario at Prepmatter Solve simulation. Once you enroll in our course, each time you play the game, you'll encounter a different scenario with different species, values, and site characteristics. This means you can practice as much as you like. Great, let's begin. The best practice is to choose 1 attribute and 1 trait. We have permeability, mobility, and energy. Looking at Site 1, mobility is the one that has values furthest from the average of 5, so I'll pick mobility and match range as 7 to 9. And for traits, I'll choose the desired trait of heat resistant. Let's click next. Alright, I've explained it more in our other Seawolf video, but here's the strategy I'll follow. Out of 4 microbe attributes and traits, if we get a match of 2 or more, I'll move it to the current site. The only exception is where the microbe has an undesired trait. So in this example, if a microbe has an aerobic trait, I'll either move it to the next site or return it. In Site 2, we know the energy range is 2 to 4. So if that microbe has an energy range that's within this range, I'll move it to Site 2. If not, I'll return it. I hope that makes sense. Now let's start with our first microbe, Tegenium. Mobility and energy values are within the range, and it also has the desired trait. So let's move it to the current site. Parenthesis. Permeability, mobility, and energy values don't meet Site 1. Also, it has an undesired trait. Now, will I move it to Site 2 or return it? Let's check its energy value. It's 2. So that's within the range of Site 2. I'll move it there. Proclicus. Its permeability is 8, within the range. Mobility is lower than 7 to 9, and energy is within the range. And given it also has the desired trait, it meets 3 out of 4 requirements. That should be on the current site. Our next microbe is Abyssinian. Its permeability is within 6 to 8. Great. It has mobility of 5, lower than 7 to 9, and its energy is higher than 3 to 5. but it is heat resistant. So it meets 2 out of 4 requirements. I'll move to the current side. On a side note, I received a question in our other video about why we pick our threshold as 2 out of 4 but not 3 out of 4. Depending on the scenario, of course, there's a risk of not having enough microbes allocated to the current site. To ensure a healthy distribution of microbes across different categories, and possibly slight skew towards the current site, we recommend setting the threshold at 2 out of 4. Even if you don't have too many microbes allocated to the next site or return, we'll have another 2 sets of 10 microbes to sort out later in the game. Let's continue. I can't pronounce the next microbe's name. None of its attributes is within the range of site 1, and its trait is a completely different one, scoring 0. Its energy value is lower than 2 to 4. This means I'll move it to the return pile. Next, we have Aprophilium. Its permeability is 8, within the range. Mobility is 9, again within 7 and 9, great. Its energy is lower than 3 to 5, but it is heat resistant, so scoring 3 out of 4. This should be on the current side. Alright. Diffovibrio. Looking across 3 attributes, this microbe meets all the requirements. Its trait is also the desired one, so it scores perfectly. Next, we have Alicella. Its permeability and mobility are within the range, but its energy is only 2, and its trait isn't desired or undesired, so it meets 2 out of 4 requirements. Let's allocate it to the current site. The next microbe is Flavobacter. Since it has an aerobic trait, we can't put it in the current site. Let's look at its energy value, which is 4, and that's within site 2 requirement. So let's move it there. Lastly, we have Salmonella. Its permeability is quite low. 8 mobility is within the range, but energy is really high. It has heat resistance, so it meets 2 out of 4 requirements. Let's allocate it to the current site. Alright, now we'll pick one microbe at a time. I'll first rule out any microbe that may have an undesired trait. We absolutely don't want them. Second, I'll look at their values and check if they have any desired trait and make my decision based on that. Let's start with this first set of 3. Looking at their traits, they all have the undesired trait. That's unfortunate, but we still need to pick one. Let's look at their attribute values. The first microbe has one attribute within the range, that's mobility. The second microbe doesn't have any, and the last microbe also doesn't have any attribute within the range. That's a poor selection of microbes. I'll pick the first one. Our second set of microbes seems more promising. First of all, none of them has aerobic as a trait. The first microbe, Parapeus, has mobility within the range with a phosphorus removal trait, so it scores 1 out of 4. Let's look at the second microbe. Its energy value is 3 to 5, and it is heat resistant, which is the desired trait. Looking down at the 7 microbes, only 2 have desired trait. So having more heat resistant microbes is a plus. This microbe scores 2 out of 4. Moving to the third microbe, it doesn't have any attributes within site 1 requirements. It only has the desired trait, so it scores 1 out of 4. This means we'll need to pick the second microbe. Let's continue. Acinetobacter only has mobility in the range, scoring 1 out of 4. Shigella has permeability, mobility, and energy within the desired ranges, so that's 3 out of 4. Let's look at the third microbe. While the trait is a desired one, none of the attributes meet site 1 requirements. That's 1 out of 4. I'll pick the second microbe, Shigella. Alright, these microbes are all light sensitive, so let's check their attributes. The first microbe's permeability aligns with site 1. Okay. The second microbe also has only one attribute, mobility, within the range of site 1. Let's look at the last microbe. It only has energy, meeting site 1 requirements, so all of these microbes only score 1 out of 4. So to decide which one to choose, I'll look at the 9 microbes at the bottom and check what values we may need to create our final treatment. Since the mobility requirement of site 1 is quite high, I'll start with that. We want to reach an average between 7 and 9 for mobility once we create our final treatment. Looking down, there are some microbes with low mobility scores. So I'll pick the first microbe, Ultramonas, which has a high mobility score. I may not end up choosing this microbe in my final selection, but I had to pick one microbe out of these three. Alright, let's read the instructions at the bottom. Select 3 microbes whose average attributes and collective traits most effectively match the site information. This selection will represent your contamination treatment. Here's my logic. First, I'm eliminating any microbe with a non-desired trait of aerobic. There's only one. Next, I'll look at those with the desired trait of heat resistance. There are 3 microbes. We need at least one in our treatment, so we get the 20% score. Now, let me see how many attributes each aligns to. Absicus has permeability and mobility meet in the Site 1 range. Looking at lemon cola, only permeability meets the range. And lastly, Cedovorax. It has only energy within the range. So I'll start with Absicus, since it has more attributes that meet the range. Now that I have a microbe that has a desired trait, I can now prioritize microbes that meet the attributes the most. Let's look at each one of them. Sarcobacter's permeability meets the target, so 1 out of 3. Telanima only has mobility meeting the target, again 1 out of 3. Nesosensis, its permeability and mobility are looking good, 2 out of 3. Though I'll keep going in case I find a microbe that has all 3 traits meeting the Site 1 requirements. Next, Nitrosmilus. Only permeability meets the target. We already looked at lemon cola and Cedovorax. They don't score 3 out of 3. We also established Acinetobacter has an undesired trait. Moving on, we have Shigella. Its permeability is 6, great. Its mobility is 9, again within the range. And its energy is 5, again meeting Site 1 requirements. I'll move this to our final treatment. The last microbe is Ultramonas. It seems it only has permeability meeting the target. Alright, now that we have our 2 microbes lined up, let's do some math. I'll first sum up the first 2 microbes' values for each dimension and check what we require for the third microbe. To do this, let me first multiply Site 1 attribute ranges by 3. So the total sum for permeability should be 18 to 24, mobility 21 to 27, and energy 9 to 15. Starting with the permeability, the total sum of 2 microbes is 12, mobility 16, and energy 7. This means our new microbe should have the following ranges: permeability 6 to 12, mobility 5 to 11, and energy 2 to 8. There must be quite a few microbes meeting these criteria. I'll look at our final microbe. Ultramonas has a permeability of 6, a mobility of 10, and an energy of 2. They all meet the criteria, so let's put this in our treatment. The average attributes of these 3 microbes match Site 1, so we'll get 20% times 3, 60% from this. We have at least one microbe that has a desired trait, so that's another 20%. And lastly, none of our microbes has an undesired trait, so another 20%. We should be at a 100% treatment effectiveness score. Let's confirm this and move to Site 2. We first need to sort out some microbes that we moved to Site 2 earlier. After this page, we'll follow the same steps as in Step 1. Provensis' permeability is lower, and mobility is higher than Site 2 values, but its energy is within 2 to 4. And it has the desired trait, so it scores 2 out of 4. Let's put it on the current side. Alright, Flavobacter. Its permeability is high, but the mobility and energy values match Site 2. Similarly, it has a desired trait, so it's 3 out of 4. Let's also move it to the current side. I'll move a bit quicker through the second and third sides, since I think you've got the gist by now. Looking at Site 2 characteristics, I'll pick an attribute that's further from the average, so either permeability or energy. I'll pick permeability and set the values to match Site 2. And for the traits, I'll choose the desired trait of aerobic. Let's move on. We can see 2 microbes already allocated to the current site from the previous steps. Okay, we can also see an additional insight about Site 3. The desired trait is phosphorus removal. Alright, let me see this. Permeability and mobility values match Site 2, but not energy. And it has a desired trait, scoring 3 out of 4. Let's move it to the current site. Next, Anabenia. Permeability is low, and mobility is a little high. But energy meets the range of 2 to 4, and it has a desired trait. So 2 out of 4. I'm moving it to the current side. Okay. We have another microbe that has a desired trait. Let's look at the values. Its mobility and energy match side 2. So in total, 3 out of 4. Again, let's put it on the current side. Phoneorax. It also has an aerobic trait. Its mobility meets the target too, scoring 2 out of 4. I'll move it to the current side again. The next microbe is alkali genes. Its permeability and mobility match side 2, and it also has a desired trait, so 3 out of 4. I'll move it to the current side. Okay, Berolis. All of its values are too high, and its trait is light sensitive. It scores 0 out of 4. I'll return it because it doesn't have the phosphorus removal trait, which is desired for side 3. Nitrospira. It doesn't seem to have any attributes matching side 2. Also, similar to the previous microbe, it is light sensitive, so I'll also move it to the return pile. Oceanosporium. Its permeability and energy values meet side 2 requirements, and its trait is phosphorus removal. Even though that matches side 3, I want to stay consistent with my strategy, and since this microbe scores 2 out of 4, I'll move it to the current side. Alright, the next microbe is Crocosphaera. It only has mobility matching side 2, but it also has the desired trait. Since it meets 2 out of 4 requirements, I'll also move it to the current side. Okay, now the last microbe. It has permeability matching side 2, but that's it. And its trait matches side 3, so I'll move it there. I'll now select 4 microbes to add to our prospect pool. Since the second microbe has the undesired trait, I won't look at it. The first microbe's values are too high, it scores 0. The third microbe's values seem a little bit better. At least its energy matches side 2. I'll pick this. Let's go over the next set of 3 microbes. The first microbe's permeability matches side 2. It scores 1 out of 4. The second microbe has permeability, mobility, and energy meeting the requirements. That's 3 out of 4. Let's check the last one. It only has a desired trait, so I'll pick the second microbe. Alright, looking at these 3 microbes, I'm ruling out third microbe right away, since it's heat resistant. The first microbe has permeability, mobility, and energy meeting all requirements. That's 3 out of 4. The second microbe only has the desired trait, so I'll pick the first one. Okay, here's our last set of 3 microbes. Aeromonas has all the attributes matching side 2. It also has the desired trait of aerobic, so that's 4 out of 4. I'll also check the third one since it's also aerobic. But it's 3 out of 4 because its energy value is too high, so I'll go ahead and pick the first microbe. We are at the last step of side 2. I'll first eliminate Anthophorax, Hydrobus, and Rosobacter since they are heat resistant, which is the undesired trait. We also want at least one microbe that's aerobic, which is the desired trait. We have 2 options, Thalatalea and Aeromonas. The first one only has permeability matching side 2, while Aeromonas meets all the attribute ranges, so I'll pick that. I'll now go over some microbes we haven't looked at yet. Polymexis has no attributes matching. Corybacter only has energy matching. Let's move to Aisturga. This is a good one. It meets all 3 ranges. I'll move it up. And the last microbe we haven't looked at is Spopeus. It also matches side 2 perfectly, 3 out of 3. We don't need to get too analytical with the set. Each microbe meets side 2 values perfectly, so this means the average attributes match side 2 just fine. That's 60% already. We have 1 microbe that's aerobic, so that's another 20%. And none of these microbes have the undesired trait, so that's another 20%. Again, we should reach 100% treatment effectiveness score. Let's move to the third side. We'll need to sort out the only microbe we previously allocated to side 3. Its permeability and energy match side 3, and it has the desired trait. Let's move it to the current side. Alright, since mobility is the furthest from the average, I'll pick this attribute and set it at 8 to 10. And I'll pick the desired trait of phosphorus removal. Our job should be easier now. We only have 2 options, either to move microbes to the current side or return them. Starting with the first microbe, its permeability and mobility match side 3, and it has the desired trait. Let's move it to the current side. Ligophytium. Its permeability is 5, which is within the range, and so is mobility. So that's 2 out of 4. We should also be on the current side. Marfigura has permeability, mobility, and energy within the range. It has the desired trait too. That's 4 out of 4. I'm moving it to the current side. Next, this microbe's permeability and energy are a match. It also has the desired trait. This also goes to the current side. The Citicus has mobility and energy within the range. Let's move it to the current side too. All right. The next microbe has the undesired trait of heat resistance, so I'll return it. Okay, the next microbe. It has both mobility and energy matching side 3, so 2 out of 4. Let's move it to the current side. Nereschella doesn't have any attribute matching side 3 values. Even though it has the desired trait, the score is 1 out of 4, so I prefer to return it. The next microbe's permeability and mobility match side 3, and it has the desired trait, so 3 out of 4. This goes to the current side. Let's look at the last microbe. It has the undesired trait, so I'll return it. We'll now select 4 microbes to add to the prospect pool. All of these microbes have the desired trait. Great. Let's compare the attributes then. The first microbe has 1 attribute matching, energy. The second microbe has 2 matching attributes, mobility and energy. The third microbe only has permeability matching side 3, so this means I'll pick the second one. All right, here's the next set of 3 microbes. The first microbe has mobility and energy matching, 2 out of 4. The second microbe has 1 attribute and 1 trait matching, so 2 out of 4 again. And the last microbe also scores 2 out of 4. Its permeability and trait match side 3. Since all these 3 microbes have the same score, which one should we pick? Looking down at the 7 available microbes, 4 of them have the desired trait. So when we come up with our final 3 microbe treatment, we only need 1 microbe having this trait. So I'm not too concerned about picking a microbe with this trait. Instead, I would pick the first microbe as 2 of its traits match side 3. Look at the next set. I'll eliminate the third microbe as it has the undesired trait. Let's look at the first microbe. It has a mobility of 8 and energy of 5, both matching side 3. It also has the desired trait, scoring 3 out of 4. The second microbe only has mobility matching, so only 1 out of 4. Let's pick the first microbe. In this new set, the first microbe has mobility and energy matching. It also has the desired trait, so 3 out of 4. The second microbe doesn't have any attributes matching, but it has a desired trait, 1 out of 4. The last microbe has permeability, meeting side 3 requirements, but that's it, 1 out of 4. I'll pick the first microbe then. Just like how I did earlier, I'll first look for any microbe having an undesired trait. There is none. Okay. Next, I'll look at those with the desired trait, and there are 6 of them. Pterospira has only mobility matching. Pseudomonas has permeability, mobility, and energy matching. Great. Let's move it up. From now on, I don't care if our second microbe has the desired trait or not. I'll see if I can find another microbe that has all 3 attributes matching. Rupensis. It doesn't have any. Lithosoma has only 1. Glassatella only has 1 too. Rhinella doesn't have any matching. Iasonia has both mobility and energy matching. So far, this is the best candidate. Moving on. Plotigenium has mobility and energy matching. All right, this is also a good option. Let's check the last 2. Pneummonas also has 2 attributes within the range. And finally, Mesopeus also has 2 attributes that match. This means we need to pick 2 microbes from the last 4 I've gone through. Looking at side 3 values, we want to keep permeability 3 to 5. So I'll pick Iasonia, which also has low permeability value. I'm afraid if I choose 2 microbes from the last 3 microbes, the average permeability value might be higher than 5. All right, let's do some quick math. I'll multiply side 3 attribute ranges by 3, so we know the total sum our 3 microbes should have. Permeability 9 to 15, mobility 24 to 30, and energy 15 to 21. Let's now sum up the values of our two microbes in the treatment. Permeability 6, mobility 17, and energy 12. This means our last microbe should ideally have the following ranges: permeability 3 to 9, mobility 7 to 13, and energy 3 to 9. Starting with Plotogenium, all its attributes are within these ranges, so this should give us a 100% treatment effectiveness score. The other two microbes would also probably give us the perfect score, so we could pick anything at this stage. Let's confirm our treatment. In Prepmatter simulation, once you finish the Seawolf game, you'll have the chance to check how well you've done across these three sites. As anticipated, we managed to reach 100% effectiveness scores in each site. Just know that there may be multiple ideal selections of microbes, so on the left we are showing the combination of treatments that would give the values closest to the attribute ranges. Each time you play the Seawolf game in Prepmatter simulation, you'll encounter different scenarios, and sometimes achieving a 100% score may not be possible, as it might be capped at 80%. I'm glad we were able to reach a perfect score in today's video though. Fantastic! It was a long video, but I hope you found our video helpful. Before you leave, if you'd like us to share more content like this, please let me know in the comments. And don't forget to check out our simulation at Prepmatter. Best of luck with your prep!